Hey guys, Devin from Dr. Garage here. Today I wanted to talk about knockoff parts or replica parts or whatever you want to call them. So for years now, I've always been very adamant about recommending people buy the parts from the original company that did the research and development for said parts. Uh, you know, Ethically, I think it's the right thing to try and support the original company, especially if it's a very specific and unique design. I think it's important to try and support the guys that did the research and development to make that part. Another thing too is that I think you get a better quality part than if you were to buy it from a replica or a knockoff company for way cheaper than what the original company sells it for. So one of the main reasons why I feel this way is a buddy of mine years ago made a part for an A86, and he only made a few sets of them, and he sent out these sets to some cars he was sponsoring. So he'd get some test results to make sure the parts were okay, and then he was going to crank them out of production and sell them. There's a company in the A86 world, actually like 80s, late 70s import cars that makes really high quality parts, but a lot of their parts I found are replicas of another company. Maybe they're hard to find in the US, but also I found out through my friend that they also rip off of American companies. So essentially, one of the drivers that he sponsored sent his part to this company, and they immediately reverse engineered it, cranked out production, and put my buddy out of business. It cost him thousands of dollars essentially. He spent all this money to build these parts and to design them and to CNC them and all that stuff, and it just down the drain because all of his profits are gone because somebody else cranked them into production. So that said, I went against my own advice here and I bought some knockoff parts. Now, I did this because the part I bought is something I've been looking at for a long time, but I just haven't quite been able to justify spending money on it. The original part is like $1,000, and this from this knockoff company, replica company, whatever, full price is like $500, and I didn't pay anywhere close to that. So essentially, what I bought is tension rod brackets and tension rods for an A86 for my car. So if you're not familiar with Japanese tuning companies, you might not recognize the color, but this color, the sparkly blue, is characteristic of Cusco brand suspension parts. I love Cusco. I've been a huge supporter of them. I've had Cusco parts on a bunch of my cars. I love their design. I love the company. I've worked with them before. I've met them at SEMA. They're just great people. And I really like the stuff that they do. So I could never justify buying the Cusco parts because it was really expensive, and it didn't quite give me any kind of advantage for for $800 to $1,000. Didn't give me enough advantage for me to justify it. But these they were so cheap that I even bought multiple sets. I can make these parts in my garage, and it was something I wanted to do. But for the cost of materials alone, it probably would have cost me more than what it cost me to buy a couple sets of these knockoff ones. So I'm going to go over some of the key details of these knockoff parts here that I was not satisfied with. So I'm going to start with the tension rod. This tension rod is super fat right here. Like, that is super thick. It just seems really weird. It's kind of an odd shape. I have Megan Racing ones on my car right now, and they're not that fat. It's also super thick this way, which, I mean, it's good because that means it's strong, but I think the piece is like a sand cast piece, so it's not really, I don't expect that to be all that strong. That's probably why it's so thick. Now, the next thing was a shipping error. So if you see on this one, there's an R, and if you see on this one, there's an R. They sent me two right side brackets. I'm going to get a right and a left. So I got to contact them to see if they can get me the right one or another left one. So that way I can have a complete set and not have to have spare brackets for one side. Now, the next thing I noticed is when I started looking at it, some of the welds are they're okay quality. They're not great. They're kind of what you'd expect if this were like a $200 part, maybe $150. But for a $500 part, I would have expected way better. So I'm glad I didn't spend that much on it. Now, one of the other things I found I thought was kind of interesting and kind of frustrating is I was looking at this. Like, you can see, so along this edge, see if I can catch it in the light just right. You can kind of see it as I move it there, right there, yeah. So along this edge by the two holes, you can see that it's been ground down there. Now, on the other side, when you look at it, hang on a sec, you can see there's some holes. So those holes, let me get my face out of that shot there. So these holes are indications of a porous weld, porosity essentially. That happens when you don't clean the metal right, or you don't have shielding gas, or it's not shielded whatsoever, so you get some of this porosity. Now, the weird thing to me is that I don't understand why there's any weld in that spot anyway, because there's nothing welded there. So I don't know if when they made it, they started welding there, and then they realized, oh crap, I'm not supposed to do that, and they cut it off and ground it down, or if when they were cutting that bracket piece, they cut where they weren't supposed to, and so they welded it back together. I don't really know. But needless to say, that's the bracket that I'm going to send back so I can get another left side bracket. Or my first left side bracket, I should say. The reason why I wanted these tension rod brackets is because on the A86, the sway bar on the stock tension rod bracket, like, it's a huge pain to remove the sway bar. The sway bar mounts up and over a bunch of stuff, so you got to remove a bunch of stuff. Versus on this bracket, you've got these two holes. And these two holes, that's where the sway bar bolts to. Doesn't rot up and over anything. Makes it real easy. I don't anticipate having to pull my sway bar a bunch, but it's a nice thing. The other thing, too, is that the stock tension rods on the A86, they normally go all the way through this, and then there's a flat part here, and it bolts into the end of it. Versus this uses a Heim joint that bolts in the middle here. That's nice because you can use offset spacers to kind of move the tension rod left and right, give you a little bit more steering angle clearance. That's kind of like the main reason why I bought these, is because I wanted that. But with the quality, I would not recommend buying these at full price. And this is why I recommend people buy the right parts, or buy the better quality parts. So I have the skills that I can fix these. I can weld them back together if I need to. I can go over the welds that are obviously low quality to make sure that it's strong enough. But most people don't have that, so this is why I'd always recommend buying the right parts or the better quality parts. Plus, thinking about my friend, I'd much rather try and support the guys that actually did the research and development and not put them out of business. It's always important ethically to me to support the guys that designed it, the guys that did the time to develop them. So, anyway, thanks for watching. If you have a similar story, share it in the comments. Or if you think I'm wrong and you think that knockoff parts are a way better bang for your buck, let me know too.